one of my most important observations. Our democratic institutions have remained robust in the face of attempted foreign interference. Although there are a very small number of situations where foreign interference may have had some impact on the outcome of a nomination contest or the result of an election in a given riding.
Yeah, just believe the good Judge Hogue. This is incredible. That's all I can say about this report. Yeah, it's very weighty, very voluminous, lots of words, but it's gaslighting. And I'll be back in a minute to explain why I'm saying. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist. Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday. Yes, my God, we're going through January at a rapid pace. January 29th, 2025. Pleasure to have you here. I'm going to be talking about a couple of things today. Of course, the foreign interference inquiry under Madame Justice Hogue. What did she find? And CERB number 2, how the Liberals plan to beat the non-confidence motion. Yes, it's another crisis, another emergency. And as I've been saying for weeks, they created the emergency. They want the emergency. They want the tariff crisis with Donald Trump. And I didn't see this one coming. I saw that they wanted to run against Donald Trump in the next election. I didn't see how they were going to use the tariff crisis to create another welfare dividend. Yeah, another CERB. More money thrown at you so you'll vote Liberal. More inflationary spending that could be as catastrophic as the tariffs. So you lose either way under the Liberals, whether it's Justin Trudeau, who's still in charge, or Mark Carney, or even Chrystia Freeland. But turning, and I should say, please like the station now. Give us your thumbs up and subscribe. We need subscribers right now desperately. Got to hit that 40,000 plateau. I really appreciate what you're doing here. And I tell you, folks, what's happening right now with the Hogue Inquiry, it's been amateur hour with so many outlets not getting it. This is about whitewashing Justin Trudeau. A lot of people saying, oh, it's all about Justin Trudeau lying. He's going to get it for lying. Justin Trudeau didn't lie. He just parsed his words. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute about this. Suddenly, there's no traitors, no treasonous people, no MPs in the hawk or pay of a foreign government, just bad judgment. No evidence of traitors, Justice Hogue says. We'll get to this incredible statement. Just problematic conduct. You know, of course, problematic can mean any number of different things, and that's exactly why she used that word. And we'll get to the fact that the NSICOP report released last year said precisely the opposite. No, it didn't use the word traitor or treasonous, but it said people were influenced by foreign powers, largely China. We know that. Interesting how the mainstream media is reporting this whole report. Its emphasis is on India, second most active country. China is barely mentioned. China is the one that bought 2 elections. And I am going to say that again. Bought 2 elections for Justin Trudeau. Even though Judge Hogue says, no, I don't think so. Well, I do. I do think so. And we're going to demonstrate why that is. But India, of course, is where Justin Trudeau wants you to look. That was the deflection. Remember the news conference that he forgot he had, where he said India is conspiring to assassinate and to murder Calistanes in Canada. And he talked about expelling and talking to Prime Minister Modi in the most serious term. Suddenly, that never happened. There's no allegations now against India, but of course, India is the second worst in terms of this. The People's Republic of China in the report is, of course, listed as the most active perpetrator of foreign interference targeting Canada's democratic institutions. The PRC views Canada as a high priority target. That's the reality. I tried to get Sam Cooper on the broadcast today. I asked probably a little too late in his schedule, but here was Sam's take on this yesterday. And you notice that Justice Hogue had a so-called news conference without the news conference. There was no questions. She delivered her statement. Bang, I'm gone. Sorry. So she says some may have benefited without knowing it, but the evidence does not show any MPs plotting with foreign states against Canadian interests. Hogue reiterated to journalists in Ottawa without taking media questions following her report's release. Commissioner Hogue, was the NSICOP 2024 report overblown? One reporter attempted to ask. Sorry, she said. As you know, I cannot take questions. Out the door. Michael Cooper has been on this. Now, he's calling it a damning indictment of Trudeau's government. Justice Hogue found that Beijing, or in other words, China, directed an anti-conservative campaign in the 2021 election. The Trudeau government knew about it and did nothing to stop it. So let's have a closer look at what the good Justice Hogue actually said. And going back to, you remember the Chinese spies at the Winnipeg microbiology lab and how they were surreptitiously essentially fired from their jobs, removed from the country, and with nothing being said about the fact that they had become security risks. They were sending back intelligence to China. Now, I've been saying for quite some time, where's the link between that? Where's the link between that incident and the fact that Trudeau got help in the election from China? Was there a quid pro quo? I have been maintaining for quite some time, yes, there's a quid pro quo. China got its spies back, and China helped Trudeau out in the next election. But let's listen to Justice Hogue. And this is incredible. This is gaslighting at its best, or at its worst, if you will. But this is an example of what we have to put up with in Canada in terms of governance. We are becoming like a third world country. We know that there's a huge problem here. We have an inquiry that comes back and essentially refutes the report that initiated the inquiry and says nothing to worry about here, folks. And she has the nerve to say the real problem here is not foreign interference, because yeah, it's always been happening since, as she says, the dawn of time. Really, I guess the cavemen were trying to politically influence each other in some ways. But she has the nerve to say the real problem here is disinformation. Where have you heard that one before? Justin Trudeau's primary talking point is that it's disinformation. That's the problem.
Nor have I seen any evidence to suggest that there are currently so-called traitors in Parliament. While I saw evidence of some concerning behavior, the evidence does not show any MPs plotting with foreign states against Canada's interests.
I have the names of a number of parliamentarians, former parliamentarians and or candidates in the Conservative Party of Canada who are engaged or at high risk of, or for whom there is clear intelligence around foreign interference. And I have directed CSIS and others to try and inform the Conservative Party leader to be warned and armed to be able to make decisions that protect the integrity of that party. And the decision by the leader of the Conservative Party to not get those classified briefings means that nobody in his party, not him, nobody in a position of power, knows the names of these individuals and can take appropriate action. It also
some concerning behavior.
Before we go.
Ready to question.
Now, before we continue with this, what's happening here? This is one of the last days, I think the last day of the public hearings in the Hogue Inquiry. Justin Trudeau is desperately trying to deflect attention from China to India. At the same time, he's saying he's got a list of names. He's doing his Joe McCarthy moment here, saying he's got a list of Conservative MPs who are involved in this. Now, a lot of folks are saying, oh, Trudeau lied on the stand. Trudeau lied about knowing this. Trudeau committed perjury. Actually, there are a list of names. I don't know how many Conservative names are on that list, but Hogue never said there were no names. She simply said none of these people were guilty of anything beyond bad judgment. So Trudeau, of course, will escape with his life again, because all he's saying is that according to the report that only he read and a few other people, there are names named in that report, and we will never know who those names are because suddenly it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter. These people are guiltless. These people had nothing to hide except to just exercise some bad judgment.
Intelligence when it comes towards the Liberal Party members, because we need to make sure if you're going to end someone's career, you're doing it in a responsible way. The decision of the leader of the Conservative Party to not receive the necessary clearance to get those names and protect the integrity of his party is bewildering to me and entirely lacks common sense.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie about.
Now, here's the tour de force of the whole thing, and I'll get to her comments about this not having any effect on federal elections in a second here. But here's where I see collusion between this report and the Trudeau government's agenda. What is the Trudeau government's agenda in terms of disinformation? It's to censor everybody's information except that which the Trudeau government deems to be not disinformation. Let's listen to her.
The government has the primary responsibility for ensuring national security and protecting our democratic institutions. But what I have read and heard convinces me that society as a whole must contribute to defending these institutions if we want to ensure their survival. Foreign actors are no longer content to use traditional means to interfere. They are also using sophisticated technological means and increasingly sowing disinformation in traditional media, but above all on social media. Distinguishing what is true from what is false is becoming increasingly difficult, and the consequences are, in my view, extraordinarily harmful. The evidence, but the greatest threat, the one that I believe threatens the very existence of our democracy, is disinformation. This threat is all the more nefarious because the means available to counter it are limited and very difficult to implement. Nevertheless, we must not give up, but rather attack it forcefully altogether. This cannot be the sole purview of government. It will not work.
Okay,
does not.
What has Justice Hogue just delivered here? She has become an apologist for Bill C-63. It might have to be renamed if it ever sees the light of day again, but this is the Online Harms Act. This is how we fight disinformation. She has become an apologist for the Trudeau government and its agenda of censoring anything it deems to be disinformation, anything it deems to be objectionable, anything it deems to be contrary to its woke policies, anything it deems to be contrary to it being reelected. That becomes disinformation. And it's really bad on social media, she says. Not just legacy media, it's worse. Oh, it's far worse on social media. And we have to fight it. Now, how do we do that? Well, obviously, we need legislation to put down disinformation. That's the unsaid portion of what she's saying here. And this is absolutely in sync with the liberal policy. I find it interesting. Now, in terms of the Chinese government, the communist government of China, having nothing to do with Justin Trudeau winning the last two elections, I'll remind you, a CSIS whistleblower said that China had direct influence on liberals winning in several ridings, perhaps 10, perhaps 20, perhaps winning the last two elections for Justin Trudeau. Suddenly, that's not part of the equation anymore. No, we don't want to talk about that. Justin Trudeau is suddenly a legitimate prime minister. At least he was 4 years ago. That's what they want you to believe. Remember when Pierre Poilievre did, and this is the Pierre Poilievre with the glasses.
Justin Trudeau has inspired a lot of suspicion by his refusal to, one, answer questions about his knowledge of Beijing's interference to help him in two successive elections. Leaked CSIS and PCO documents now show that Beijing worked to help elect Justin Trudeau. That is an accepted fact. He doesn't even deny it. But he kept it hidden until courageous whistleblowers at CSIS released it for him.
You remember that? That's what started this whole inquiry. That's why we had the Hogue Inquiry. Because there was evidence that China had influenced two elections. And suddenly, that's not on the table anymore. Something really smells about this whole deal. And I can tell you it's the usual thing. And we're going to get to worse here. What is going on right now is that you are being totally used. You're being played by the liberals. I didn't think they were this smart. I really didn't give them credit for being this smart. And it's not smart in the sense of being intellectually superior. They are very clever, crafty in terms of their politics. And it's sinister what they're doing here. But they are controlling the agenda again by controlling how everything, the news is unfolding. They've got their mainstream media partners with them. Now, we just recognized a new public safety minister, David McGuinty. He's the brother of the former Premier of Ontario, Dalton McGuinty. The same David McGuinty who Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he wouldn't recognize if he walked in his room. Now, David McGuinty's the public safety minister. He was also the chairman of the NSICOP group that first raised the red flag about there being people in the House of Commons and the Senate, possibly, who were under the influence of foreign powers. He was the chairman of that group. He said that they were not just unwitting, that they were witting players in foreign powers like China. Suddenly, David McGuinty can't remember any of that. And this is our public safety minister who is doing such a horrible job of following up on border security, and we'll get to that in a minute as well. But David McGuinty is clearly out of his depth. This is a guy, as I said yesterday, spent 20 years in the back benches of the Liberal caucus as a member of Parliament for Ottawa South. He suddenly has been catapulted into the front benches as public safety minister, one of the most powerful positions in the federal government. And he is completely out of his depth and can't even own the report on foreign influence that he co-authored as the chairman of this Parliamentary Security Committee that was charged with looking into foreign influence. Let's listen to how he tries to avoid all responsibility.
Now to talk about this a little bit more is Public Safety Minister David McGuinty. Hi, Minister. Good to have you here in studio. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Vashi.
I wanted to start off on the NSICOP report versus what we heard from Justice Hogue, and particularly because you chaired that committee, and your name was on that report that came out. That report concluded that there was intelligence suggesting that there were basically parliamentarians, former or sitting, who had wittingly engaged in foreign interference. She concludes the opposite, that there is no witting engagement. There are no traitors in Parliament. Who's right?
Well, the first thing I want to say to Madam Justice Hogue is this is an incredible piece of work. This is
incredible piece of work. Well, so are you, David McGuinty. To suggest a report that refutes your report is just a great piece of work. Are we missing something here?
a good report, a great diagnosis of the challenge of foreign interference, and a great series of recommendations for improvement. Look, there's not that much different between the report done by NSICOP. In fact,
there's not that much difference between these two reports. There's actually a huge amount of difference. His report suggests there were witting accomplices of foreign powers. The Hogue Inquiry report suggests they just exercised some bad judgment and had no idea they were being used by foreign powers.
3 foreign interference reviews, not one, and on 2 separate occasions made similar comments. But what she's revealed is she said she's had much more access to more difficult obtained intelligence. So she had more time, more lawyers. Her mandate was different than the work that the review committee at NSICOP does. And another difference is this. At NSICOP, you have 11 parliamentarians. So they're quite steeped in the practice and the art of politics. This was a legal approach to the challenge, and I think taken together.
Hold it. What does that mean? They're steeped in the practice of politics. He's now suggesting his report was politicized? That you can't take it seriously? It wasn't objective?
Each other. And I think right now it's time for us to move forward to implement much of the change.
And I have questions about how that change will be implemented, but I guess I am confused on how they might complement each other. And just when you made that comment about there being kind of politics involved, are you intimating that part of the conclusion reached by NSICOP was political in nature?
No, I think that there's just simply an experience that comes to bear.
No, I just said that, but just ignore what I said. Yes, he is saying it was politicized. He can't even stick to his own talking points.
When you're a group of parliamentarians deliberating about different fact scenarios and intelligence that's given to you, she's had the benefit of perhaps additional information, as she says in her own review, information that was not brought to our attention at the time. But I don't think there's much daylight here at all between the 2 reviews. I think if you look at the bulk of the text, 90% of it is very similar, and the recommendations tend to be very overlapping.
I would argue that the daylight is that there are people who read your report and your committee's report and concluded there were traitors sitting in Parliament, and that prospect existed for such a long time that there were MPs calling on the government to release names, to name names, versus hers, which is conclusive that there are not traitors in Parliament. I don't get how that's complementary.
The word traitor never appeared in any NSICOP review.
But she debunks the idea even that there are semi-witting or witting people. She says if they are involved in that, based on further evidence that she was able to review and the underlying evidence that you based your conclusions on, that she did not arrive at that conclusion.
Yeah. I don't know if she went that far. I think she went as far as saying that there was behavior which was questionable. I think in that sense, she's reaffirming a lot of the findings of the NSICOP review, but there is no indication at all. There never was an indication of the word treasonous or treason or traitors never appeared.
Never. Nobody ever contemplated. How long does it take an MP to be completely absorbed into the political culture of the cabinet? Oh, probably about 12 hours. How long does it take that to manifest itself to the public? Well, about a month. And here he is completely revealing that he's been completely taken over by the deep state that runs the Trudeau government. And this absolutely frightening that he can sit there and suggest there's no difference between these two reports. No difference at all. We're saying the same thing. No, you're not.
In any works. I think these were remarks made by an intemperate politician at an intemperate and maybe an inappropriate moment.
Here's what the report said. Unfortunately, the committee has also seen troubling intelligence that some parliamentarians are, in the words of intelligence services, semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics. That doesn't say traitor, but it says a whole lot that she didn't.
Well, she said there was evidence of very concerning behavior. I don't see a lot of difference between what we're saying, what we said at the time, what she's saying now. And again, she's had the benefit of a different kind of process, maybe a dozen lawyers, hundreds of witnesses, much more time, more resources. But I think you would find if you went back to the NSICOP members of the committee and asked them how they felt, I think they feel that they've made a major contribution. Here's the good news.
But did you jump the gun? To be fair, do you think you put too much? Do you think that part of the report essentially, like, do you still stand by it? Or should it have been maybe more cautious?
No, absolutely. And in fact, the same language was.
Yeah, he still stands by it. Been told to say that. And this is the guy, of course, who's looking after the border. Yeah. And as I've been telling you all week, there is no border plan. There's no border plan. And Melanie Joly can run down to Washington and pretend to be negotiating with the United States, with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. She can pretend that she has some comprehension of what's going on. But the Trudeau government does not want to have a border plan. They don't want to satisfy Donald Trump's demand that we secure the northern border with the United States. They have no desire to do that because it's useful to them to have a trade war, to fight back with this dollar for dollar tariff nonsense that we keep hearing from the Trudeau government. They don't want a solution before February 1st. And we're days away from this tariff coming down. Do you think the Trudeau government looks panicky right now? Not at all. They look completely calm because this is the way they planned it all along. This would degenerate into Trump imposing, slapping on 25% tariff on all goods and services from Canada because the Liberals wanted it that way from day one. This has been the plan since day one. I've shown you how the border plan that came out of the fall economic statement was a facade, was a joke, $1.3 billion over 6 years. There's no more border plan today than there was when that was released in December. Absolutely no more has been added. And boy, is this show getting suppressed by YouTube. And once again, when you talk policy, they can't stand it. But I'm telling you this. What I didn't see happening is that the Trudeau government would not only use the border crisis or use the tariff crisis to fight the next election against Donald Trump and not Pierre Poilievre, but the Trudeau government would use the tariff crisis for inflationary spending to try to buy your vote with more welfare spending. You remember the CERB? Pandemic spending. People can't work. We're locking down the country. We're ruining the economy. And at the same time, we're dispensing welfare checks to everybody. It was called the CERB. Here comes SERB 2. And guess what? Jagmeet Singh is now suggesting he's got to support the SERB 2. They're not calling it that yet. But yeah, he's got to support that because, oh, Canadians are going to be hurt unless I support it. So let's recap here before I show you Jagmeet Singh's incredible backflipping on this issue. What is really going on here? Trudeau is using the tariff crisis with Donald Trump and ignoring the border crisis because he wants the tariff crisis to increase. And the results are going to be threefold. He can run against Donald Trump in the next election, or any liberal leader can run against Donald Trump, not Pierre Poilievre, or for that matter, Jagmeet Singh. They are going to run against Donald Trump. They're going to introduce more inflationary spending to buy your vote. And they're going to get Jagmeet Singh on side again to avoid a non-confidence motion when the House returns in March. Unless, hopefully, the Supreme Court orders the prorogation canceled on February 14th and the House returns sooner, and we might be able to bring this government down. But let's listen to Jagmeet Singh do some verbal and intellectual gymnastics here.
If Trump follows through on his plan with tariffs, would you keep the Liberals in power and allow for the passage of a work relief program before supporting a non-confidence motion?
I'll just start off by the fact that I've spoken with a lot of workers who are deeply worried about what the Trump tariffs might mean. They say, sometimes I lay awake at night.
Okay, I couldn't let that pass. Do you believe for a minute that Jagmeet Singh has been talking to workers? This is the man who drives the BMW, has the Versace accessories, would walk across the street to avoid a worker or even an ordinary Canadian because he's part of that Toronto elite that despises them. But yeah, he's been talking to workers, and the workers have been telling him, please support the Justin Trudeau government.
Saying, if that tariff goes through, do I lose my job? And what's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen to my family? When we think about the analysis that's out there, if those Trump tariffs come in place, there are hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs at risk. Think about what that means for those workers, hundreds of thousands of workers, for their families, for those communities. This could be devastating for our country. So we do need to have a plan in place to support those that are impacted, those businesses, those workers, most importantly. I have not had any conversations with other opposition leaders. I think we need to come together to have a discussion about what is the best way forward. I've not had any discussions with the government related to this. If there is any desire to move forward, the government should call us together, like we did during COVID, and discuss a plan that supports workers.
I want to fight like hell to defend Canadian jobs. I want to defend our country. And the only way we do that against Trump is with force. We have to fight back, respond with retaliatory tariffs, dollar for dollar. We also have to consider ending the flow of critical minerals. We know that that's something that they need. The States needs it desperately. And
guess what, Jagmeet? We're not approving the mining of any critical minerals in this country. The Trudeau government's put a cap on all of that. So we've got nothing to broker with.
Especially one of the best buds of the president, Elon Musk, needs those critical minerals for his batteries. So let's hit them where it counts. Let's fight back and defend our jobs here in Canada.
Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are focused on themselves. They're fighting themselves instead of fighting for Canadians. And for that reason, today I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go.
Will you declare no confidence in the Liberal government as soon as possible?
All tools, all options are on the table.
It is clear the Liberals have let down Canadians. We fought and fought the Liberals at every step, and we got as much as we could get out of them through our fight. It is clear they've walked away now. It does not matter who is chosen as the next Liberal leader. They have let you down. They do not deserve another chance. So as soon as there is a confidence vote, you Democrats will be voting against the government.
Today, I notified the Prime Minister that I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement. Liberals have let people down. They don't deserve another chance.
Yeah, well, we left this husk of a man explain his own actions or lack thereof. This is a horrible excuse, even for a politician. But there he goes again. He's going to backtrack on voting against this Trudeau government because he's found another excuse to do so. He's in Justin Trudeau's pocket. He remains in Justin Trudeau's pocket. The country is in very bad condition. Pierre Poilievre needs to insert himself in the center of this debate, to not be talking about hate crimes and not be talking about things that are not integral to the tariff battle. And he needs to acknowledge that the border security problem has not been addressed by the Liberal government. He needs to acknowledge that, and that he will do better. That has to happen, because otherwise he's going to be sidelined in this debate. Join me tomorrow. I've got former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss on the show. She will be on at 11, not 10. She's in Calgary this week, and I had to adjust my schedule so she could get on the show. It's going to be 11 o'clock. Thursday morning, I have Liz Truss, former British Prime Minister. We're going to be talking about Mark Carney, whom she does not remember very well because he was the governor of the Bank of England when she was Prime Minister. And unlike what Mark Carney will tell you, he did nothing to help the British financial system. So we'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to know. Continue to resolve to resist and keep fighting, because this country is in trouble. But we can overcome.